as Bishop Murphy said in his first talk, we were at first known as just simply people of the way. So what was fueling Peter's imagination as arguably the first church planter? He was trying to show people the way. So then what I did, and I really did this for myself, and I'm just kind of sharing with you the fruit of my own research and thinking, is I just said, okay, well, let's see if we can get into the mind of Peter and what he thought he was doing, how he thought he was doing it when it comes to showing people the way. So here's just a few simple thoughts for us to go home with. So let's start first of all with the calling and sending of Peter. John 21, where Jesus says to him, this conversation that goes on, Peter, do you love me? Lord, you know my heart, and each time after one of those couplets, Jesus says, feed my sheep, care for my lambs, feed my lambs. Well, this sounds like a pastoral call. How did that pastoral call get translated into the work of starting new communities of followers of Jesus? How did that notion of feed my sheep, care for my lambs be made into this great apostolic commission and ministry that Jesus gave Peter? I mean, there's an obvious go there, but I think the insight here is that before there was a go, there was a come and have breakfast. Before you go, Jesus said, you come be with me. And I think there's something about that that's instructive to us, and that is as we go from a place like this, that in your going, Jesus said, come follow me. In your going, follow. And again, as somebody who's been planting churches since I was 22 years old or something, I've simply found that if I'm not occasionally having breakfast with Jesus, that the financial pressures, the spiritual pressures, the disappointments of work that doesn't pay off the way we'd hoped it would pay off, you need to have a coming that's in your going. And of course, the backstory to this passage, that Peter and some of his contemporaries who were Jesus' first friends and first followers had gone back to fishing. And you know the story, they'd caught nothing on their own strength. And so Jesus tells them, put your net on the other side of the boat. And there's this astonishing set of results that happens from what would appear to be this really simple kind of obedience. And I think what I want you to hear this morning is that this is not a fishing lesson. That Jesus was not on the beach with an ancient sonar device or fish finder saying that, the fish are on the other side of the boat. I think this is actually a missional or church planting lesson. I think as a practical matter, it means something like this, that keeping Jesus at the heart of mission means keeping the guidance of the Holy Spirit at the heart of mission. And that as you go, occasionally you're going to have these come moments, and these come moments, these moments of using the analogy of breakfast, these moments are going to be times when the Spirit will speak to you. And it's the Spirit who will give witness to Jesus, keeping him at the heart of mission and giving us our directions. So it made me think, it seems to me that the big vision for Peter was Jesus and his kingdom. And that was the basis for church planting. Now, I've been a consultant. I've been a church planting coach and mentor. I've worked with lots of denominations over my life. And, there are a lot of the mainline denominations who a number of years ago, some of them early in the game, 20, 25 years ago, began to see the decline of their denominations and thought, we need to start more churches. And I don't have any beef with that. I think what I would want to say is that there's a greater animating, sustaining power for church planting when one has Jesus and his kingdom as the basis for church planting. Not simply, what does it mean to make sure that this institution continues? When I got my first calling to plant a church, it went something like this. I was probably 19 years old, maybe 20. I can't remember. My wife Debbie worked at a store in a mall that was a very popular store at the time in the mid-70s, and the Jesus movement was happening all around us, and her and some of her colleagues at work had become Christians, and they had boyfriends that were becoming Christians, and they decided they wanted to have a Bible study. And I don't know, I might have been converted all of 3 or 4 weeks, I can't remember. But they decided that at this home Bible study that I would teach. And I'm just so glad no one recorded it because I have no idea what I said. I have no idea what I could have possibly said. I think that I'd gone over to the bookstore and bought Wesley's 1-volume commentary on the Bible. I think that's what I owned. And so that was my sort of entryway into, biblical exegesis. So I have no idea what I said. But what's really a very clear memory to me is that in that Bible study were some of the first people in the old Maranatha bands. Anybody here old enough to remember, Maranatha music? And, these, there was one of the guys from The Way and somebody from Daniel Amos, and I can't remember their names now, but they would go out on these tours. And then they would come back to this Bible study and say, man, all the kids back east wish there were churches like Calvary Chapel. And I would hear this, every few weeks from somebody else who'd been out doing something. And I remember sitting there one night, and this little thought just exploded in my heart. Well, then why doesn't somebody go make some? I had never heard the term church planting. The thought that hit me was, why doesn't somebody go make some? Because in my mind, I'm thinking a guitar, a Bible, a stool. What could go wrong? I mean, honest to God, it never dawned on me that we could fail. I'm not kidding. I mean, now I know too much. Now I'm one of those adults who knows enough to worry about church planters and all that can go wrong. But at the time, it never dawned on me that we could fail. And I just want you to know the honest to God reason is because I never thought the gospel could fail. Why would I? What I saw happening around me were people dropping like flies, meaning, notorious sinners coming to Christ and kids giving up LSD and drugs and rock and roll and coming to faith. It never dawned on me that the gospel could fail. It's possible that you could try to plant a Presbyterian church and it fail. It's possible that you could try to plant a Baptist church and it fail. It's possible that we had a lot of failures in the Vineyard. And it's possible that you could try to plant an Anglican church and it fail. But I think if we can somehow get in our hearts that what we're trying to do are create communities of the King and his kingdom, I think success rate goes a lot higher. That there's something about this crucial connection that Peter felt to the man Jesus and to Jesus's words and works, the way he announced, demonstrated, and embodied the kingdom of heaven. Something like that is what grounded Peter in our Jesus and then grounded him in his work. Yesterday when I was listening to Ed Stetzer, he was talking about, that the whole body has gifts and that this can all be leveraged for mission. And that's true. I mean, I don't care what your spiritual gift is. If you are on a church planting team of mine, if you were on our launch team or core team or whatever, I could show you how you could leverage your gift for the cause of church planting. Now, I don't have time to go into that now, but trust me on it. I could show you, I don't care what gift you have, I could show you how that gift could be leveraged missionally. But listening to Ed yesterday and thinking of the story that I just told you, and again, I don't want you so much to understand this, I want you to try to feel this. When I walked into John Wimber's living room for the first time, I was 22 or 23 years old. I had no seminary education. I was just finishing a 1-year Bible school program. I had a degree in business. And I had this feeling that I was being called to ministry, but I didn't know what it meant. And so the head of the Bible college, who was a friend of Calvary Chapel Bible College, a friend of John Wimber's, said to me, hey, there's this new guy in Calvary Chapel called John Wimber, and he's, formerly the head of the, what do they call it, the Charles E. Fuller Center for Evangelism and Church Growth or something like that. And John had been the head of it under Peter Wagner, but now had started this Calvary Chapel Church in Yorba Linda, California. So I do what my Bible school teacher tells me. I go and I meet John. We're sitting in the living room, and after we've talked, and this is when John was just first beginning to engage with the things of the Spirit. And he looked across his living room at me, and he said very tentatively, very sweetly, very humbly, a lot of generosity, he said, Todd, I don't know. I might be crazy, but I think the Holy Spirit just asked me to ask you to come here and do an internship with me for 6 months, and then I'll send you out. 23 years old, no formal education. I moved from Southern California to Wheeling, West Virginia, a city I'd never been to in my life. I did not know one person there. But my wife and our partners, this other couple, had come to believe through prayer and fasting that God had called us to Wheeling, West Virginia. I think John gave me $600, a little kick in the butt, and said, go get some puppies. If you get some puppies, I'll give you your papers. So I remember at one point I called him and said, John, I want to go to hospitals and pray for sick people, but they won't let me in because, we didn't have collars or anything. We had Hawaiian shirts. And Hawaiian shirts didn't work in hospitals. Go figure. And it never dawned on me to wear a collar at that point. And so I called John and I said, John, I need papers. They won't let me in the hospital. Because I'd figured that was a good way to meet people. Go to hospitals and just pray for sick people. So I'd walk into hospitals and start wandering around praying for sick people and, get thrown out. And because I wasn't a real life chaplain. And so I called John and he mailed me my first license to minister. We didn't know about these big services for deacons and stuff. He mailed me, are you catching this? He mailed me a certificate that said, Todd Hunter's duly licensed, let him in your hospital, something like that. I still have it. I still have it in a file somewhere. Now, I don't say that in any way to challenge our tradition. I've come to deeply love and appreciate our services of ordination. I say it to say this, and if I have any word from the Lord this morning, and that's a tough thing to say, and I don't know if I do, but if I do, sitting there the other day listening to Ed, I wondered, do we have the capacity to find and send 20-somethings? And I think if we don't, we need to get it. We need to somehow find the confidence. John, beloved, laying on the breast of Jesus. No one knows for sure, but I did the best work I could do on this. A lot of people think he was maybe 17. Nobody thinks the disciples were older than their mid to late 20s. And Jesus, remember that great passage in Matthew 28 where he shows up, and I love the way Eugene gets this in the message, where Jesus comes and some of the people worshiped him, but remember in the message Eugene says, but some held back, not sure about worship, not sure about risking it all on Jesus. And this is the phrase I love. But Jesus, undeterred, went right ahead and gave this commission. I see a little divine risk in there. You don't need to be an open theist to see a little divine risk in there. Where he just looked at this crowd of young people, some doubting even, some not even really getting God's kingdom agenda through Jesus. Some people not really getting what God was up to in reconstituting the people of God, what salvation meant, the kind of life that they were being called into, and yet he sent them on their way. Of course, as Moses Tay told us this morning, having breathed on them the Holy Spirit and said, even as the Father sent me, so I send you. And I think that we're going to have to find a way to find and release 20-somethings and somehow find that sort of kingdom capacity to risk again on another generation of people. Why? It's because of what my friend and professor, I probably shouldn't admit that in public, but Lynn was my professor for my doctoral work. That shows you a little something about me. But, as Lynn says, they're natives to the culture. We're immigrants. Anything I know about it because I'm professor of evangelism and contemporary culture. But my kids, my 18-year-old daughter, my 26-year-old son, they're natives to it. They get it. And if we can get them the gospel, they will get the culture. And if we can get them in the culture, mentoring, coaching, discipling, helping them, I think there might be a little spark there.